Good afternoon, everyone. The International Parking and Mobility Institute presents today's Learning Lab. Behind every smart city is smart tech, using intelligent error correction to deliver a frictionless parker experience presented by gtechna. My name is Kenny, and I'll be assisting Jason Casimir from gtechna in moderating today's presentation. As a reminder, today's presentation is being recorded. We will make the recording available online and will post it to IPMI's YouTube channel within a few days. Before we start, I'd like to go over a few quick housekeeping rules for today. This Learning Lab is in webinar format and all participants' microphones and cameras have been muted. If you have questions for today's speakers, please feel free to queue up a question at any time by typing it in the Q&A tab. Jason Casimir will moderate the questions and get to them as time allows. To ask a question, click the Q&A icon in the Zoom menu. A window will open. Please type your question and click send. You can also use the chat button and ask questions and make comments in there. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our speakers. Mike Bourre, VP of Sales and Marketing, gtechna; Dave Onorato, CAPP, Executive Director, Public Parking Authority of Pittsburgh; and Sean Renn, Vice President of Marketing and Communications, Flowbird, North America. Mike Bourre is an electronics and instrumentations technology expert with more than 30 years of experience working in tech. Mike brings with him practical experience in a variety of tech business ventures across a number of verticals spanning a global market. Mike's been with gtechna for 10 years as VP of Sales and Marketing. Dave Onorato, CAPP, is the Executive Director of the Public Parking Authority of Pittsburgh and is recognized as an industry leader with over 25 years of experience. Dave oversees the day-to-day operations of Pittsburgh Parking Authority and his vision for the future. Dave directed the pay-by-plate installation, which was the first organization to implement full pay-by-plate technologies in the U.S. Under his direction and guidance, the authority was recognized by IPMI as Parking Organization of the Year and has earned accredited parking organization with distinction status. Sean Renn has been in the parking industry for over 14 years and is responsible for directing all marketing activities for Flowbird in the United States. His role includes managing the introduction of new Flowbird solutions to the market in order to improve mobility in downtowns and on campuses across the country. Sean also directs public awareness campaigns for new system rollouts and is also responsible for managing integration partner relationships. Now I'm going to turn the audience over to our presenters. Mike, David, Sean, the audience is all yours.
Thanks, Kenny. I want to thank IPMI for hosting these learning labs and webinars. Additionally, welcome and thank you all for joining and participating in today's learning lab. Pittsburgh's journey going from antiquated single-space meters to being the first city in the U.S. to introduce a rollout pay-by-plate technology in a multi-meter operation driven by solar panels. Before we start our first slide, I wanted to give you a summary or a quick history of Pittsburgh and how we arrived at where we're at today. In 2010, we were directed by the city to perform and run a P3 process on both our garage operations, facilities, and our on-street meter operations. We ran a process which was a learning curve for us and a good learning tool. We received multiple bids in excess of the budget we estimated it. Fortunately for us, all bids were rejected by the city, and at that point, we decided it was still time for an upgrade, and we would perform the upgrade in-house. We heard from customers that they wanted another option to pay other than quarters. And additionally, we wanted to adopt technology that would not be outdated in 3 to 5 years. Our first step was to contract with a consultant to assist in determining what meter technology was available at that time, 2012 and 2013. At that time, it was determined that there were single-space smart meters, pay and display, pay by space, and pay by plate out there on the horizon, and very intriguing to us. We issued an RFP in 2012 for multi-space meters, and we received 10 very competitive bids. They were mostly for pay and display and pay by space. And during the interview process, again, the pay by plate kept creeping out to us and was again very intriguing. At that time, we decided to reject all bids and issue a second RFP strictly for pay by plate. Again, we received the same 10 bids from the companies. They were all available then. We issued an RFP and awarded a contract to Calais for multi-space meter with pay-by-plate technology. With that, we understood we were leapfrogging 2 generations of meters, and by the first ones being installed in 2012. By the end of 2013, installation was complete, going from just under 11,000 single space meters to 1,100 multi-space meters. Next screen. Challenges. We knew after recognizing and deciding on an upgrade of our meter system, we understood that there would be challenges on the road ahead. Noting that we didn't want to make change just for the sake of making change, we wanted a solution that we could grow with. We created an internal task force to work hand in hand with the consultant to perform a comprehensive analysis of our current system and prepare an RFP that would address all our concerns. Next screen. The challenges we face. First, if your hometown's anything like Pittsburgh, the public doesn't like to pay to park, and they are generally resistant to technological changes. But our obsolete meters and the need for the upgrade was the driving factor in our decision. Our current system on single space meter had a high percentage of inoperable meters. Probably we estimated about 20%, but after a full review of our system, it was probably higher. There was a decline in revenues. Customers wanted another form of payment besides quarters. Our current operation wasn't user-friendly. The lack of data rather than no data from the current system. Operational inefficiencies and lack of internal controls with the single space meters. And the city was requiring a more efficient parking system. Next slide. This is our mission statement. In summary, we provide strategic planning and management of the parking throughout the city, enforce both city and state ordinance, and assist with economic development throughout the city. Next slide. As we didn't concentrate so much on our mission, we looked at the goals and objectives we wanted to achieve going forward. The authority envisioned more than simply overcoming acute shortcomings of our current single space meter system. We wanted to implement an automated solution that would increase revenues, improve our organizational efficiencies, effectiveness, transparency, reporting capabilities, and the ability to leverage other emerging technologies in the future. Also, we understood the importance that whatever solution we ended up with, the public buy-in and trust in its integrity of the solution was paramount. We didn't want, in our minds, we didn't want to issue tickets to individuals that made payments at the meters. Next slide. Considerations for implementation. The new system must address all the challenges identified in the prior slides. Plus, we knew and adopted a public awareness campaign with our vendor, CAPP. We educated the public, knowing again that the trust and the integrity of the system was paramount. If they didn't buy into it, it would be a failure at the beginning. Infrastructure costs, both the installation and the removal of the meters itself, we accounted for. And if you noticed on the prior slide, the first or second one, the amount in the room you have to have for single space meters as they're taken out. We also incorporated replacing all our parking signs throughout the city, which were 25 to 30 years old. As part of the contract, the new vendor had to install new signs, as 3 new signs for every meter that was installed. We wanted the back office support of the highest technology and would drive operational efficiencies and the ability for future expansions going forward. Next slide. The vision for the future as we saw it. Once the meters were installed, we had a vision to expand upon that. Because when the meters were first installed, the benefits were mostly for the end users. They had a high-end technology and state-of-the-art for their payment of parking. But going forward, we saw the benefits coming to the authority with vehicle LPR enforcement, phone apps. In 2015, we added 1 phone app. In 2019, we added 3 additional ones. So today, we have 4 vendors with phone apps and options for customers to pay now at either the meters or one of the 4 phone apps. We also have text and pay and virtual permits today. A residential parking program, which used to be the old hang tags, but we went with virtual permits and all recognized by the license plates. Going forward, we're still looking to enhance upon the dynamic pricing and ticket by mail. We're working now to do ticket by mail in our surface lots as a pilot program. And we're also looking to our garages to bring new technology there and possibly using pay by phone as a solution. Next slide. The enforcement software enhancements as we went forward, we understood there were going to be concerns and issues going forward before we rolled out the system. The three main ones were latency, plate error input by either the customer or our PEOs, and the communication delays issues by the software. We understood that these, plus any other tweaks that came up, would have to be addressed. Working with our team we had in place, we created solutions through technology that would handle these issues. The first one, today our system, parking rights are checked twice. Input errors for the officers and public is also dealt with the back office software. Error correction, also we have several software corrections to handle this. Our system has auto voids in if someone pays and the information isn't transmitted on a timely basis. And if the meters go offline, we have a software correction that will handle that. Again, noting that our concern was we didn't want to issue tickets to someone who made payment for the system. These solutions made a success of our operations and the implementation of the pay-by-plate. They're going to be discussed in more details later on in the presentation. Right now, I'm going to pass along to Sean, who's going to take the next couple slides. Sean?
Thank you, Dave, and thanks everybody for joining us today. One way to look at the advantages of pay-by-plate parking is to look at the evolution of parking technology over the last 30 years. Way back in the early 90s, we saw the rise of the multi-space meter, which provided great benefits such as operation savings, added payment options, and access to important data. But at that point, we were talking about pay and display parking, where enforcement was very low tech, and officers had to check every dashboard for a receipt. And of course, people didn't love having to walk all the way back to their vehicle to display their receipt on their dashboard. As technology evolved, we did see a lot of interest in pay-by-space parking around 2009 to 2011. That's because wireless communications were better and enforcement handhelds were becoming web-enabled at the time. There was also a desire then to have data down to the space level, and we were seeing some interest in sensor technology at the time. But what Pittsburgh proved in 2012, when they became the first large-scale city to deploy pay-by-space across the whole city, was that pay-by-plate had all the combined advantages of pay and display and pay-by-space. So it was kind of the best of both worlds. You could park more cars on a block like you could with pay and display because you didn't have to delineate spaces with lines, but you could enforce without having to check everyone's windshield. So it was good for the end user and it was good for enforcement. Over the course of time, and what we see now is we see the huge growth of pay-by-cell payments, which is a natural fit for pay-by-plate enforcement. And we now see the pay-by-plate is really the preferred parking configuration for cities and universities because of the features that I had mentioned, but also because of the rise of e-permits where you don't need to have a sticker or a hang tag anymore. Everything could be enforced by the plate number. The ability to extend your time from any pay station, the ability to offer special rates and parking validations with the plate number. And of course, the ability to use license plate recognition, which is a technology that has really evolved over time. Now you see, not only the LPR on the vehicles, but you see the LPR on the handhelds, you see fixed LPR, and that technology has gotten really strong and accurate. Next slide, please. As Dave mentioned, Pittsburgh was the first large-size city to implement pay-by-plate citywide. So their success helped slowly grow pay-by-plate in the first few years after the launch. And as you can see on the next slide, we saw cities like Miami, universities like Texas Tech embrace pay-by-plate, and the benefits were clear right from the start. Enforcement was just more efficient with pay-by-plate. Next slide, please. So if we look at today, we can see how much pay-by-plate has grown. If you just look at this map, this is just an example of cities and universities that have over 20 pay stations, and you can see really how this has grown over time. One example, actually a couple examples recently, is the large deployments we've seen over the last 3 or 4 years in Chicago, Philadelphia, and Portland, Oregon, for example. Next slide. So a challenge right from the start with pay-by-plate was the need for public education and public awareness. Pittsburgh did a really good job when they launched their system. Their public awareness campaign started with speaking with key stakeholders, such as city officials, administrators, and expanded to local merchants, and finally communication out to the parking public. One great idea that was utilized at the time was the use of key fobs to write down the license plate number so people didn't forget their license plate. That was a huge concern at the time, that people would say, oh, I just can't remember my license plate. But of course, we've proven all that we can remember phone numbers, we can remember social security numbers, so remembering a license plate is not really that big of a challenge, but giving people something that makes it easy to remember was good. Now, of course, what we do is we tell people to take a picture of their license plate with their phone, and then they can always refer back to that. The takeaway here is that, while the technology that you implement is important, you first really have to start getting buy-in from your local people in your area. The merchants, the mayor, the city council. You need to get everybody on board and do a good job with the education, and also the media, by the way. And of course, that goes beyond just what we're talking about today with pay-by-plate. That goes with every parking system that you roll out. Next slide. So one of the other challenges that we saw with pay-by-plate early on was the reliability and speed of the cellular networks. We knew that the transaction information had to get to the enforcement officer quickly. And while the networks at the time did a pretty good job, we still saw some transactions coming in slower than we had wanted to. Now, when we look at today, the technology has really improved over the course of time. As you can see, just in the last 30 years, we've gone from 2G networks to 3G network, which just got shut down by AT&T last month. And T-Mobile will be doing the same shortly. So now, we see predominantly all the pay stations in the field are now 4G, and eventually will be upgraded to 5G at some point in the future when that technology reaches the parking world. What we see with 4G is that the communications are just more efficient. You can have more bandwidth, much faster, obviously, and much more focused on data transmission than previous networks. Next slide, please. Now, because the cellular networks improved over time, the latency of the data improved as well. What we see here is a snapshot of Pittsburgh from 2014, where almost all transactions were coming into enforcement between 30 seconds and 2 minutes, which was pretty good. But still left room for latency and possible tickets in error, which is really what we're focusing on today, is how do you avoid those tickets in error. If we look at the next slide, what we see is that today in Pittsburgh, that 98% of the transactions are coming into enforcement in under 30 seconds. That's the graph you see on the left. But we do see, if you look at the graph on the right, that we still see, potentially about 2% of transactions could be coming in about between 1 and 6 minutes. So that means there's still a potential for tickets written in error. And Mike is going to take it from here and discuss ways to deal with that latency.
Thanks a lot, Sean. Actually, let me start first by talking about IPMI forum. The reason why we're having this this webinar, this IPMI lab, is concerning IPMI forum. At the IPMI forum about a month ago, a few cities were talking about, we're giving out tickets in error. We're a pay-by-plate city, and we're ending up giving tickets in error. Is there any way for us to correct or try to solve this issue of people inputting their tickets in error? So thank you for the IPMI forum. I think that was the reason I called Dave right away when I saw that. And I said, listen, Dave, I think we need to chime in to IPMI lab, and I think this would be a great, we've done this years ago, so I think this is going to be great to share what we're doing. So next slide. Okay, so how to deal with latency. So like Sean was talking about, you have to adapt to real-time communication factors. Could be communication problems, latency, human error, input plate errors. So there's a whole bunch of things happening here that if your enforcement solution is not well adapted to this, you will be giving out tickets in error. Next slide. So these are all the different, in the two columns, we have a column called latency, one called no communication. So as, because this is all what I like to call near real-time communication. So if any of these factors come up, cell network is overloaded, or a cell tower is down, or the modem in the kiosk is dead, it's not doing anything, it could cause tickets in error. So go to the next slide. So the first thing that we do is that, first of all, our parking rights is been built. It's been architected in a way that it's available 24/7. It has to be that way. Not that there's a life that's dependent on it, but more so to do that. We want to make sure that that information is available for the parking enforcement officers. Next slide. So here's an example of some data that we've taken in from 2017. So this is a 1 week's worth of parking rights. So in this specific week, 125,000 people paid for parking through pay by phone or at the meter. And the total checks that the PEOs did was around 27,000. So what I'm going to do now is go through the process of how we dealt with this to ensure we didn't give any tickets in error. Go to the next slide. So in step one, what we do, first of all, we publish an API with all the vendors on the marketplace to ensure that if somebody's paid, they push us the information. So instead of us asking all the payment vendors, did you get anything? Did you get anything? What we do instead is we have a published API and all the vendors push that transaction to us. So the way we look at it, if we can save a second or a millisecond, we'll take it. Step two, error correction. So this really touches right on what the IPMI forum was talking about. So in this specific case, in that specific week, we eliminated a potential of 1,662 tickets in error because we corrected some input errors. And I'm going to be showing a slide afterwards to give you guys an example of the things that we do in the background. The next step, which is also something that's important that wasn't brought up in the forum, is auto communication handling. So in this specific case, there was some meters that were not communicating, even though somebody paid for parking. So how do you deal with that? So I'm going to be touching that. And as you can see, it's a very low error rate, 0.0015% error rate, but still it would have accounted for 188 tickets in error. So again, our goal is to reach 0 tickets in error. The next step, autocorrect. In this example, there was actually 0.00029% error rate, which ended up in 37 tickets in error. But I'll show you what we've done with these to, at the end of the day, we resulted in 0 tickets in error. Next slide. So in this example, what we're showing is the percent of human error. So what we've seen, this was back in 2013. So back then, we were showing almost a 1% error rate. Go to the next slide. Now, what we've done is interestingly enough, we thought that, okay, well, pay-by-plate's new to the city. Eventually, people are going to get used to it, and these errors are going to go away, right? Wrong. That's not what happened. So what this is showing is in 2014, what ended up happening is if you look on the right side on the bottom, the actual percent of human error actually tweaked up a little bit. So interestingly enough, people still were doing errors, even though they must have been accustomed to pay by plate by then. So this is very interesting. So I'm going to show you guys a bit more information. Next slide. So on this slide, as you can see, on the first line here, so on completely on the right where it says parking right plate is where the parker inputted the plate at the meter. The beside it is what the officer scanned or inputted on their handheld enforcement device. So as you can see, if you look at it if I look at it right now, if I look at each item, you can see here there's a transposition on the first one, an MS instead of an SM. So if you look at that, if I look at all of these plates that were paid, I can assess pretty quickly, you know what, I personally would not give a ticket to any of these 4 examples, because to me it looks like, you know what, this person is probably paid. But the nice thing here is that it's the system that calculates this. This is all machine learning that we use, and the system tells the officer in all these cases, the officer will have paid on their enforcement device. So the officer doesn't have to try to judge, well, should I give him a ticket or not? The system automatically in the background will be able to tell that officer it's paid or not. And in all these 4 cases, it would show paid. So in every case, as you can see, there might be an additional digit or there might be a digit missing. So any 1-digit error, we will correct and show paid with the different algorithms that we use. And specifically, I wanted to talk about some cities were saying, well, we're trying to do an outreach to the citizens to talk to them about, you know, try to teach them. But one of the things that I found interesting is that I was looking this up, and they say that 1 out of 5 people have dyslexia. And interestingly enough, Albert Einstein had dyslexia. So saying that you're going to, do an outreach and try to teach people not to enter the plate wrong is going to be, I think, very difficult to do. I think personally the system needs to adapt and make sure that you don't give a ticket in error. Next slide. So this example, we're often talking about interfaces, but not all interfaces are equal. So this is an example of our interface to Flowbird, and this quickly shows that we can go as deep as where the meter is, not just the Flowbird server, but we can see every terminal that's on the street. And if that terminal is not reacting correctly, our enforcement solution reacts accordingly. Go to the next slide. So in this example, what we're showing is this specific meter is not communicating. So this is all parameters we can set in our system. So within a certain amount of time, if that meter has not communicated, what we do in our system is if an enforcement officer goes on that street and checks to see if the plate has paid or not, we will show paid, because that meter obviously is still taking payment. And without knowing that knowing that that terminal is not communicating, we will show paid to ensure we don't give tickets in error. Next slide. And lastly, but the last one is about autocorrect. So in this example, go to the next slide. It'll show better. So in this slide, what we're showing completely in the bottom square, you'll see that the verify time, that's the PO that checked that plate to see if they paid. It's 10:18. They ended up giving a ticket, even though if you look at the start time, it shows 10:13. So the citizen paid for parking, but when the enforcement officer checked, it wasn't paid. So they gave a ticket. So in this specific case, what would happen is if that citizen calls Pittsburgh customer service, the customer service agent would go into our system and say, "Oh, terribly sorry, sir. We saw that the system had an error. You can throw that ticket away. That ticket has been auto-voided." So like I said, I mean, there's a lot of things that can happen here. And this, of course, is a very small amount of tickets that were handed out, but most of them we had caught. Next slide. So this is just an example, just a couple more slides left. So on the left side, you have all the payment methods. And on the right side, you have all the ways you can enforce, right? Handheld LPR, fixed LPR, vehicle LPR, like Sean mentioned. And of course, that technology is getting better all the time. But any 1 digit that is captured, not only because earlier I mentioned about dyslexia and citizens entering the plate wrong, but it could also be on the enforcement side. It could be the vehicle LPR that didn't read the plate right. So that doesn't matter. In this case, it doesn't matter. Any one-digit error, regardless how it's enforced, will show paid if with the algorithm that I showed you guys earlier, we will show that it's paid. So everything is at the same level. Next slide. So this is just to finish off. This is just to increase efficiency. So any hit that's done with vehicle LPR, fixed LPR, or handheld LPR is all shared so that the PEOs can be more productive. So if I had the handheld, I can look to see what's around me with our handheld dashboard so that enforcement is more efficient. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so Mike. Thank you so much, Mike and team from gtechna. At this time, we are going to turn it over to Jason Casimir for our Q&A portion. Jason, it's all yours.
Thank you, Kenny. I want to thank you to all the panelists today that spoke, and welcome everybody once again. Now, for the Q&A portion, I'm going to field some of the questions that are coming in. I recommend you use the Q&A panel. I do have a few questions already, but please feel free to enter what you've kind of come up with as this webinar has been going along. So I'm going to basically address specific people sometimes, or I'll address it to all of my panelists. So one of the interesting questions I'm getting is related to having multiple pay-by-cell vendors, for example, and this may go to Dave as well as Sean, and Mike want to chime in as well, and I'll ask them both because they're related. So they're wondering, how is it integrated? Meaning, is it one app? And if not, do you have like shared signage, kind of to be aware that they can pay with multiple methods? And how do you change dynamic pricing if you have multiple apps, for example?
I'll go first. We started with multiple apps probably in end of 2019, 2020. We identified them on the side of each meter with a sticker, with each vendor having a QR code and their label on the side of the meter. They're all singly integrated with gtechna and Calais. They have to send the information, push the information to gtechna. And as far as the rates go, as we brought on new vendors, we mandated that they keep the same transaction fees, and we set the parking rates that we currently had in place with our original pay-by-phone vendor. So they're all charging the same transaction fee. It just gives the customer an option of not have to download an app. If they have one of the four, they can use the one they have. So it's giving the end user more choices to make payments from, especially if someone's coming from the outside of the city of Pittsburgh and they have one of the apps downloaded. We're not forcing them to download our app to make payment into the city.
Good answers. Thank you, Dave. I think that helped to clarify that for sure. And I think it is something that you might wonder, if once you move from one to several, I think it's great that Pittsburgh accommodates that for everybody that comes to their city. Now, one question I'm getting about LPR, and Mike, you may want to address this, and Dave, you want to put your 2 cents in, is since you've been using pay-by-plate so long, some other cities are kind of weary of doing it due to privacy concerns. And the question is, has there been any blowback or lawsuits over privacy issues with pay-by-plate? And they're saying that their city attorney is concerned about that. And I would just lightly say, we don't keep all the data. We keep pictures and stuff related to actual tickets. And I'll let Dave and Mike address that further.
Jason, you kind of hit it on the head. We do scrub all the information all the reads we have that do not have tickets every 24 hours. So once a ticket's received, we do keep that information on file for billing reasons and for history. If someone calls in to contest the ticket or a payment's not seen in 3 or 4 months, we have the information. But if there's no ticket issued on the plate information recorded that day, it's scrubbed in 24 hours.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Dave brought this up to us a long time ago, and we configured the system to deal with that accordingly. So, like Dave said, the system's configured that after 24 hours, if there's no tickets assigned to that plate read, it's just flushed.
Thank you, guys. Good answers.
Jason, you were correct. As a result, when we first rolled it out in 2012 and 13, there was some pushback on the privacy concern we got from the public and the media. So that's the resolution for that. It seemed to be acceptable on their sides.
I'm glad we addressed that, because I think a lot of people, they're, even though you've done this 10 years ago, they're just beginning their journey, especially for smaller cities. And right now, with the advent of all this technology, they're really legitimately considering it. So I think that that's something that needed to be addressed. And Mike, I'm getting a specific question. I'm not sure, why it matters where, but specifically, like, what software house is the algorithm that fixes one-digit mistakes, for example?
Well, it's our own proprietary technology. There's a lot in that technology. There's not only transcription errors we look at, but there's a lot of. I can't speak how we do all that stuff, but it's like magic. But it's a great algorithm, and it works extremely well. We could go through pages and pages of plates that it was read, and the ones we said that are paid. And some people sometimes will even ask, well, is it possible that somebody might have deserved the ticket? I mean, it's possible that could happen. But what the first thing Dave would say is we would rather have a mistake on not giving a ticket than giving out a lot of tickets in error. So it is possible that maybe one or two plates in a day might be taken off, possibly. But in all the stuff that I've looked at, in all the plates that I've looked at, when I look at it with my human eyeballs, I say, I would never give those people a ticket. And our system works very well. So it's our own proprietary algorithm.
Thank you, Mike.
Just to add on to that, we're able to work with gtechna to run the reports on how many of each category there were, how many auto voids occurred for the day or the week or the month, or how many transposition occurred that we took the tickets at. So we are able to trace and track how many of these are occurring.
Thank you, guys. And if I appear like my eyes are shifty here, it's because I'm reading questions, processing at the same time to try to keep up here. And a few more questions are coming in. Some are coming in the chat. Please use the Q&A if possible. It makes it a little bit easier for me. So I would just ask that. Another one I got in a more private chat, and I think it goes to Dave. What gave you, I guess, the confidence to, introduce this pay-by-plate stuff in your city and to keep just constantly pushing the edge? Because it's nice to do it, but to be the first in certain ways, what gave you that confidence?
Well, it was back, as I noted in the prior beginning slides, we did a lot of due diligence out there. The first attempt was to do pay by space or pay and display, and we kept seeing the pay by plate. And the more we've researched it, the more due diligence we did on it, and working with our partners, gtechna, and then once a contract was awarded to Flowbird, we had it in system, and I worked closely with our IT team, who was very supportive of going with pay by plate, and assured me that if I made the decision to go there, they would get it up and running with our partners. And it was same thing. Thought process was that I didn't want to be outdated again in 3 years because the technology was changing. We're currently in the process of updating our meters to touch screens now, color touch screens, because they've been out for almost 10 years now, and the screens are a little worn on the weather. But again, we're not replacing the whole system. We're just tweaking it now. And the software and technology is still the ones we bought back in 2012. It was a risk, but I felt that the benefits versus the risk the benefits outweighed the risk, and we were successful in it. I don't look back and don't regret the decision, and I don't want to figure out what would have happened if it didn't work, but it did, and very successful.
Thank you, Dave. And, I think the nickname in the parking industry of the godfather of parking has come up several times. And, talking with you and seeing the different things you've done, and you mentioned before pushing more things, you're still going. And I think other cities appreciate that, to be able to follow and have such a good example as Pittsburgh. So definitely continue what you've been doing. It's been working. Now, I'm going to ask another question. Somebody's kind of asking, do we have, and Mike want to address this to a certain extent, if we have fixed LPR technology that enforces, permits in gated lots, and then they followed it up with another question kind of came after, how do you handle, only states where there's license plates, let's say on the rear or something like that. And it seemed to be in the context of fixed LPR. So Mike, if you might want to address that.
Yeah, with fixed LPR, some states the plate's only in the back, like in Florida. So
We're one of those too, Mike.
Yeah, and so depending on the area where you put the camera is going to be important. So so that's all in the design of what you do. So, we've done that in Ocean City and other places where we have fixed LPR. And when it comes to the read rate with the fixed LPR, we're close to 100%, if not 100%. So a lot of people are always concerned about that, but you should not be concerned about that because the technology is there now. And not only that the LPR read rate is very good, but we also have software to edit and correct. We'll say if you read the wrong, because we're not only reading the license plate, we're also reading what state it's from. So all that information can be captured. So if you want to do a ticket by mail or invoice by mail, you can do that because we can do RO requests or registered owner information, and it's fully automated in Ocean City. I don't know. Did I answer the question, Jason?
Yeah, there's more that came in, and I mean, yes, you did, and I think they're trying to get an answer where we're gonna, say how far the technology goes. So they're saying if you have fixed LPR, and in peak hours you get plates or cars riding each other super close, it can't read back-to-back cars. I mean, I would at least comment it would depend how back-to-back, and I think if people are risking accidents and they're literally sticking to each other, I agree. But depending on how high up it is, the angle that it can read from, it's pretty surprising, especially if they're not flying at 150 miles an hour either, right? So maybe you want to give more feedback on that, Mike. But.
Yeah. So a lot of times people will put even speed bumps at the entrance and exit so people can't speed out. And actually, you were 100% right. Those cameras are usually high up. So you would have to be like really sticking on somebody else's bumper to not be able to read it because in almost all cases we can. And overall, it works a little bit like a toll bridge. As anyone knows, when you drive through a toll bridge, it's very rare they're going to miss anyone. And it's the same concept. So there's actually human eyeballs that look at this information afterwards to ensure that it's 100%. So the same thing happens here.
Thank you, Mike. And I have another interesting question, and I'm going to go back to you, Mike. How do you handle vehicles without license plates? It's obviously a bit of an obscure case, but I know we've dealt with LPR vendors who could deal with that. So maybe you can comment on that briefly.
Well, I'd like to hear what you're going to say.
Well, I think it comes down to what are you trying to do? What is the process? Are we talking about just issuing it a ticket? Are we talking about towing? So I think it mostly depends on that. And I think there's ways of, you got GPS, you can obviously get a position, and then you have certain cameras that could actually deduct various things about the vehicle, such as the make, the model, things like that. But you're getting into more custom. There's a higher price point for some of these. There's a multitude of things when you get to these raw engineering solutions that go further than just a traditional license plate reading technology.
I would say, that's an exception. Go ahead, Dave.
I was going to say, it's not the vehicles didn't have license plate, but we did run into at the beginning that once the people found out we were reading the plates, they would find ways to cover their plates. And our officers aren't allowed to touch vehicles that way. So what we did, we worked with the state and changed that now. If your plate's not visibly seen, we can write a ticket for covering up the plate as a violation.
So that means, vehicle LPR doesn't handle those things very well, but there are exceptions. And like Dave just mentioned, I would have a on-foot patrol go over there and validate, if they have a sticker because they just bought the vehicle, then they could do, lookups that way. So that, those are exceptions, and that's the way you would deal with them.
Yeah, good answers. And thanks, Dave, for adding that in. It puts a little more context on just what does it mean when the vehicle doesn't have a plate. And I agree with you that people are obstructing the plate, putting non-reflective stuff on it, and they absolutely do deserve a ticket. So good move there on Pittsburgh's part, and I suggest all other cities should follow if you're going to utilize LPR. Another thing that's come up, Mike, is, how is your ticket, citation or ticket cancellation procedure? The question is, does it involve a court process? I mean, I guess it depends where you're going to cancel the citation. Did it actually make it to the point where it's in the life cycle phase, where it's going to be at the court phase?
It's not in the life cycle, and I'll ask Dave to chime in too, but it's not in the life cycle stage yet. It hasn't been sent for processing or anything like that. It's still just in the, in the ticket issuance system at that point. So the person that gets the tickets has a full day to reach out to Pittsburgh customer service and say, listen, I don't think I deserve a ticket. I'm pretty sure I paid. And if they do that, then the ticket is voided. So maybe if you can talk about it a little bit, Dave.
Yes. When the ticket's issued on a daily basis, all the creative solutions that Mike went through in his slides at the end, they occur that day. And our tickets are downloaded the following day to our parking court. We have our own court system for the authority. And once it goes downloaded to the court system, then only the judges or magistrates can remove the ticket from the system. But prior to that, the fix that Mike went through all occur before we download them to the court system. So they don't even see those tickets as being tickets, because they were auto-voided through the system before we sent them over to the courts. And they usually occur the same day the ticket's issued on those software fixes that Mike explained.
Thank you, guys. Good answers here. We're getting some interesting questions. And Sean, you had talked a little bit about the wireless connectivity improving, and then Mike went over kind of some of the steps. And obviously the transmission speeds and the latencies have decreased, and with getting rid of 3G and really going 4G plus here, like what would you say to smaller municipalities or others who are wondering, did they get that benefit too? Is that the only factor? Are there other factors? And what are your recommendations in some of the cases where they're gone full pay by plate and they got certain concerns about that, and just wondering like how you've kind of dealt with that and how you do deal with it?
Or yeah, I mean, you're going to have the majority of the time, like your cell phone, you're going to pick up good cell coverage. There's definitely going to be pockets every once in a while where you might have some challenges. I know vendors like ourselves, we just work with the customers to kind of mitigate those problems. We might swap out T-Mobile for AT&T, for instance, or Verizon. We used to be able to go backwards to go from 4G to 3G if we wanted to. That's obviously not going to be an option moving forward, but when we move to 5G, we'll be able to switch back probably to 4G. So there are a lot of different options we can work with the customers if they're having some latency issues. What's nice about the reports that the gtechna system provides to us when we're dealing with customers on latency is down to the meter level. So we can really see if you're giving people a lot of tickets in one area, we can look at those latency reports and really hone in on that one specific meter, which is a nice little feature.
Yeah, in collaboration, it's a good point, Sean. In collaboration with Flowbird, it's not just one vendor; it's a full system from A to Z. In some examples, we've worked together in other cities where the customer was complaining of giving tickets in error, and after doing an analysis of it, what we found is that there was maybe 2 or 3 terminals that were the culprit, and in some cases, Flowbird moved the meter a few feet over because the actual coverage in that area was maybe as good, or they might have changed the cell provider. So there's a whole bunch of things these are complicated systems, and you need to be able to look at the data to make decisions and make changes. So with all the data that we both have, we can have those discussions and tweak what I would call tweak, and make sure that those things are removed as issues.
Thank you, guys. And furthermore, I'll say, depending if it's in a garage or something, you might, if you're going to use wireless, need some kind of booster antenna. And I've discussed with Sean in the past where if it's possible in certain cases, you might even go with an Ethernet connection, which is a cabled connection rather than full wireless, because in certain places, for certain reasons, it may not actually be possible. So they still have a solution for that. And I think that was a good question. And when you have concerns over going full pay-by-plate, you do want it all to be connected and you want everything to talk to each other. So, we use wireless communication to do that. And I think we're lucky now that things are really finally improving. And with the advent of 5G, it's really getting to a point where the issues we had in certain places, at least, will be an issue of the past. So really looking forward to all that. Now, I have two more questions. They're not necessarily easy questions. Some we have to think how we would collaborate together to do these kind of things. I had a question, and they're just wondering, essentially, have you considered a single sticker getting in the context of multiple vendors, directing the user to a landing page with multiple payment apps? Because obviously you can have a multiple sticker solution, and this may go to Sean more because you have competitors who have that kind of solution there, and is it the type of thing that you think is even realistic to have a single sticker, or the way it's generally done now, where it's like you want this one, you go for the sticker, and so on and so forth, because you'd almost have to collaborate on the cost of some of these things in some ways, work with the city.
Yeah, I mean, what we like to do, we do like to do a collaboration with all the vendors that are involved. So a lot of times we'll lead that, or we'll have the city lead that. So when we work with Pittsburgh, we kind of collaborated with Park Mobile, Meter Feeder, Pay by Phone to make sure that we had all the right designs for the sticker. In that case, we do have all of the meter logo, or the pay by cell logos on the one sticker. I haven't seen yet, at least in my experience, like kind of just the one landing page that promotes all of them. I think people, this is my opinion, people want to be able to react as quickly as they can on the street at the time and do their download if they can right there, as opposed to going to a website and then trying to figure out who's available here. But this multi-app thing is legit. We do have several cities that we work with that are offering multiple apps, either 2 or 3 or 4. So it's really a matter of that collaboration between the city and all the vendors. You really have to piece that together.
Thank you for that answer. I think that is also very good. Go ahead, Dave.
We do see activity on all 4 apps. So it's not, of course, the original one has more transactions than the last 3 just added, but all 4 apps are showing activities every month.
Thank you, Dave. And a few more questions coming in. I don't know what the hard stop here is. Maybe it's 3 o'clock, so I'll just keep going till someone lets me know, unless we run out of questions. I'm getting a question about mapping revenue. How do you map out revenue if you use pay by phone or pay by plate? And I'll take a stab at it in the sense it depends where you want to track it. If it's going to be at the finance level and the city level, we may have multiple vendors exporting to a centralized place. Otherwise, I may address Sean first and then let Dave speak on this, because I'm sure when you always collaborate with all these people, you probably end up getting certain pay by phone vendors pushed to your system, congregating all the stats in one system potentially. So what's your take on that question?
So what we do in a lot of cities is we're, traditionally we had always been providing the back office system for all the pay station payments. And then as pay by cell became more popular, we started bringing that into our system as well. And then we launched our own mobile app. So yeah, we're bringing in the financial transactions from all the vendors in a lot of cases, and then even in some cases consolidating that and then pushing that out to systems like gtechna for the enforcement. So we're not only kind of the hub for the financial reports, but also consolidating everything for the enforcement system. So you don't have to do like 10 different integrations. You might only have to do an integration with us, and then we push it out to the enforcement system.
That's a good question. Just to follow up on Sean's comment, Yeah, that was a concern of ours or mine. When I got in the morning, I didn't want to have to pull up 4 different reports to see how much revenues were coming in the prior day. So what our phone vendors do is push the information to Flowbird, and I can call up their software, and it'll list all the transactions and revenues for the prior day based on line items, and it'll break it out by meters, phone app 1, phone app 2, phone app 3, phone app 4. So we'll see that all on one dashboard. So I don't have to look at 4 different reports, and hopefully that way I won't be missing anything from the prior day.
Fantastic. No, and I think that's a big sticking point for many people when you get into these multiple vendor type scenarios. So I think you guys addressed that question very well. And Mike, it's just someone kind of asked about if they're looking for LPR readers, should they let capital PARCS park system determine what works best for them, or should they contact us directly for integration with the parks they choose? And I just think depending on what systems you have, what you're looking to do, if you already have some of our stuff, it's always worth discussing with us and then strategizing what your best next move would be. And we're always there, to help existing customers and guide you in the direction that you need to go. Even if it's not ourselves, we'll still let you know, we'll assess and let you know essentially what should ultimately occur there.
No, I don't have to add anything to that, Jason. I'm looking at Kenny because I know the 3 o'clock's coming around the corner. He's gonna. So do you have maybe one more question?
I had one question left, and another one just came in. Someone asked, Dave, do you use handheld LPR, and what's their feedback? They know use vehicles. Do you use the handheld LPR?
We have the option of both. We have the vehicle LPRs and the handheld LPRs, where the officer just can walk down the street and scan the plate. Yes, we do use those.
Thank you, Dave. And this is going to be the last question I'm taking in here before Kenny cuts me off. I don't fully understand the question, that's why I left it. Has anyone come across a good solution for plates that are completely different? That is, the customer grabbed the wrong vehicle in an app and made a payment. Now, generally, if you're going to pay with a license plate, we're going to validate through that license plate. And if it's not that plate, it would be considered a violation unless you use a specialized configuration in somebody's permit system. We have one where you can associate multiple vehicles to a permit. And in that type of case, you could actually park whichever vehicle is registered to that permit. And if you try to park multiple plates or vehicles with the same permit in the same place at the same time, you get a shared permit violation. So that's kind of the way I understand the question. Hopefully I addressed it well. And I want to thank all our panelists and all the questions that came in from everybody today. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jason, and thank you to all our panelists. This was chock full of questions, a lot of good stuff. I want to thank everybody for attending today's Learning Lab, and I want to thank our presenter, Mike, David, and Sean, and the people at gtechna and Flowbird for participating in today's Learning Lab. We thank you for joining today, and you all may exit. Thank you so much. Have a great day, guys.
Thanks, Kenny. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Kenny.